As of October 2025, the global security situation is exceptionally fragile. A consensus is growing among strategic analysts that the world is one miscalculation away from a major conflict with the potential to become World War III. The most acute flashpoint is not on land, but in the skies above Eastern Europe. This region has transformed into an arena of intense military posturing, highlighted by a recent and aggressive increase in Russian aerial activity. For several days, Russian high-speed jets and low-signature drones have been conducting deliberate flights along the borders of NATO territory. These maneuvers are widely seen as a calculated strategy by Moscow. The goal is to probe the alliance's air defense systems, test how quickly NATO forces can respond, and ultimately gauge their political determination. These provocations are no longer limited to the airspace over Ukraine. They are now direct challenges to the sovereignty of NATO member states. This has created a highly unstable environment where a simple mistake or misjudgment could have catastrophic consequences. This sustained campaign of aerial testing has been met with a significant policy change from the United States. In a statement this week, President Donald Trump announced a new, more assertive guideline for NATO allies, essentially drawing a firm line in the sky. The directive authorizes and encourages member nations to engage and shoot down any Russian aircraft that violates their airspace. This declaration has dramatically changed the dynamic in the region. It heightens an already tense standoff and places the critical decision to fire or not to fire directly on the local commanders and pilots on the front lines. The skies, once a buffer zone, are now the most likely starting point for a direct conflict. The frequency of these encounters has been rising, leading to a critical incident just days ago over the Gulf of Finland. In a stark demonstration of the current dangers, NATO's Quick Reaction Alert, QRA, was activated following a confirmed airspace breach. 3 Russian Mikoyan MiG-31 Foxhound interceptors were detected flying inside Estonian territory. These were not routine flights in international airspace. Their path was a clear, though brief, violation of a NATO country's sovereignty. In response, NATO fighters from the Baltic Air Policing Mission were immediately scrambled to intercept the Russian jets. The standard procedure is to visually identify the intruders, shadow them, and escort them out of Allied airspace. This has been done hundreds of times. However, every encounter carries immense risk. At speeds approaching twice the speed of sound, there is no room for error. A misinterpreted signal, an aggressive maneuver, or a simple technical glitch could turn a routine intercept into a deadly engagement. While this particular incident ended without escalation as the MiG-31S were successfully escorted away, it served as a powerful reminder of the constant danger overhead. Alongside these high-speed military jets, a more subtle threat has emerged from unmanned aerial vehicles or drones. Unlike the overt challenge of a fighter jet, drone operations are often designed to create confusion, test low-altitude air defenses, and operate in a grey area of plausible deniability. This past Monday, this threat caused major disruption over Denmark's capital. Danish aviation authorities made the rare decision to temporarily shut down Copenhagen Airport, a major European travel hub, after detecting multiple unidentified drones in its controlled airspace. The incident caused significant travel chaos, showing how even small drones can disrupt critical civilian infrastructure. This was not a one-off event, but part of a wider pattern of drone activity across Eastern Europe. In late September, both Romania and Poland reported similar drone incursions. In some of these cases, the situation went beyond simple detection. NATO air defense assets, including fighter jets, were deployed to engage and shoot down the unmanned aircraft. The successful downing of several drones over Polish and Romanian territory confirmed the reality of the threat, forcing NATO to adapt its defenses to counter both high-speed jets and low, slow-moving drones at the same time. In the face of these accusations, Moscow has consistently issued firm denials. The Russian Foreign Ministry formally addressed the claims of airspace violations, calling them a baseless campaign of hysteria. A ministry spokesperson outlined Moscow's position, stating, "Our former European partners can continue to levy baseless accusations if they wish, but we will not participate in this theater of absurdity." This official statement aims to paint Russia as a calm, rational actor being unfairly targeted by a panicking West, all while ignoring the specific flight data and radar evidence provided by NATO. It was against this backdrop of repeated incursions and staunch denials that the new American policy was announced. During a press conference this week, President Donald Trump was asked to clarify how NATO allies should respond to these provocations. When a reporter asked directly if NATO countries should shoot down Russian aircraft that enter their airspace, the president gave a short, clear answer: "Yes, I do." This statement marks a major shift from the previous approach of strategic caution. For decades, the unwritten rule was to de-escalate and avoid a direct military clash between nuclear-armed powers. This new declaration effectively gives a green light from NATO's most powerful member to use lethal force to defend sovereign airspace. The policy appears to have two main goals. First, to restore a credible deterrent by showing there are real consequences for crossing NATO's borders. And second, to shift the responsibility for de-escalation from NATO pilots to the Russian pilots considering the incursion. The immediate effects of this new directive are significant, sparking a heated debate within the NATO alliance. Supporters, especially in Eastern European nations on the front line, argue that this decisive stance is the only approach the Kremlin will respect. They believe that years of diplomatic protests and routine intercepts have failed to stop Russian aggression, and that a firmer line is now essential. On the other hand, critics in other Allied capitals express deep concern. They warn that such explicit authorization could make a wider conflict more likely. The fear, voiced by many defense experts, is that this policy increases the risk of a fatal miscalculation. A local commander, feeling empowered by the US president's words, might be quicker to open fire. A pilot under pressure might misinterpret a Russian maneuver as a hostile act. The path from a single shootdown to a full-scale war is dangerously short. Downing a drone would be a serious incident, but shooting down a manned fighter jet and killing its pilot could be seen as an act of war, potentially triggering a military response that pulls the entire NATO alliance into direct conflict with Russia under its Article 5 Collective Defense Clause. Offering a detailed analysis, retired US Army Lieutenant Colonel Daniel L. Davis provides a critical perspective. He suggests that while the president's statement is powerful rhetoric, it may not actually change much for NATO allies on the ground. According to Davis, the authorization from the White House is essentially redundant from a legal standpoint. He explains, they don't need his permission. That's their national airspace. They alone make that determination, and they still will. Davis highlights a key point. Under international law, every sovereign nation already has the right to defend its airspace. The decision to use lethal force has always belonged to the individual governments of countries like Denmark, Estonia, and Poland, not to Washington. Davis argues that the statement is therefore less of an operational order and more of a political signal. Davis also places the president's words in the context of diminishing US leverage. He believes the United States has already used its most powerful non-military tools, especially economic sanctions. Regarding the idea of sanctioning major powers like China, India, and Brazil for trading with Russia, Davis points out the practical limits. "We can't impose those," he says, arguing such a move would likely hurt the US and its allies more than the intended targets. From this viewpoint, the verbal green light to shoot down Russian aircraft is seen as a substitute for more concrete actions that are no longer available. What I think this tells you, Davis concludes, is that President Trump has run out of cards to play, so now he's just using a lot of rhetoric. This assessment suggests that while the words have raised the political temperature, the actual military decisions will continue to be guided by the national interests and risk calculations of individual European nations. In conclusion, the situation in the skies over Europe is defined by a dangerous mix of increased Russian military activity and hardened Western political rhetoric. While NATO nations have always had the right to defend their territory, the explicit endorsement of lethal force by the US president signals a shift in the alliance's tolerance for risk. Europe's skies have been transformed into a high-stakes arena where technology, national pride, and geopolitical strategy collide. The critical question remains unanswered. Will this more aggressive posture successfully restore deterrence, or will it accidentally trigger a catastrophic conflict?